What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. Welcome into another edition of the NFL Weekly here on the network. Obviously, give you our thoughts on the big NFL games of the week. We are at week 3 already. I tell you, the NFL season goes by faster than anything. With me, as always, my co-host tonight, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim
How are y'all
1098.
doing?
How you doing today?
Always good, always good. Sun's still out. They said it was the first day of fall, and you can tell because it's about 88 degrees in San Diego. That means the fall is here.
Yep, we got everyone talks about what's my favorite season. I just say, look, I grew up in San Diego. I don't have seasons. If you'd like to talk about sporting seasons,
Football and
then yes.
baseball
Yes,
and
exactly.
hockey.
And Bing Crosby season, or the summer season and Bing Crosby. Plenty of favorite seasons, just maybe not the 4 most people are thinking of. But yeah, it's San Diego. We don't really have change of weather, but you know what? We pay a lot of money for that. Unfortunately, myself, I had a little extra work to do today. So Coach Lupian was not able to hop on with us. Hopefully next week, or definitely 2 weeks after that, when we're back to our normal 4 o'clock time slot.
Yeah, it has
But
nothing to do with the stellar performance of the Saints
I
last week.
mean, I,
Just
I would have to
ironic.
imagine. I wanted to hear his Mike Evans thoughts and all that stuff. I was looking around going, when did the early 2010 Steelers and Ravens put on Buccaneer and Saints jerseys? Because that's
Right,
what type
right.
of game it was. I mean, 3-0 for a while. I felt like a very not a game you expect those two teams to play, but yeah, there is a chance that Coach maybe is not too excited to talk about those Saints, but. That's a perfect little prelude into kind of our thoughts on week 2. Obviously, a lot of, I guess we can call them upsets, but now we're starting to get a little bit better feel for the NFL. So they might not actually be upsets, but there were a lot of things last week that I know caught our eyes. But Raider Jim, what were some things that you thought about for week 2?
Oh, the debacle in Vegas. How's that? That's at the top of my list. And we'll get into that when we talk about week 1. But wow, it has really just been a very interesting season. I get it. It's early. This is only week 3. But even in week 3, when we talk about the game and we're going to say, and the undefeated New York Giants, the Jets pull off a win, Baltimore probably the next best tank job compared to the Raiders. Just what a wild game. And now we've got the tight end up there in the Rams. He's gotten suspended or he's out for 3 games because for whatever the cause is, I don't
Yikes.
have the headline on that. But my goodness, this is just, it's a wild start. And you don't know, is it just because of the schedule? Is it because of the lack of the preseason game, as Coach Lupien alluded to last week? And yet you've got the other teams who are playing like they should. The Bills are just unstoppable.
Yeah,
Kansas City will either just come out and we'll beat you outright, or if you want to get in a fist fight, okay, we'll go toe to toe with you too. You know, we'll finesse you, or we'll just stand toe to toe. Great start to the season, I think.
I agree. I think week 2, the one thing I'll remember, if I do remember anything from it, just because the memory ain't what it used to be, but I think it will be the debacles, and that's plural. Obviously, Raider Jim had a situation there with the Raiders, but you also alluded to some of the others. I mean, the Jets essentially, what, 90 seconds? They're down by 13 points. There's 90 seconds left in that game. And Joe Flacco still kicking. He leads the Jets down. Obviously, they got a nice lucky bounce on the onside kick. An interesting thing for me though is I want to say a couple years ago, Nick Chubb very alertly ran out of bounds at the 1 yard line when he could have gone in for a touchdown. That would have put them up by 13 points. There were a lot of people who were frustrated by it, but at the end of the day, the game ended. All they had to do was kneel on the ball. And
Right.
I've always said this: coaches and players don't care about the spreads. They don't care. They just want to get the victory. And that's unfortunate because Nick Chubb was in a situation not quite the same. It was a lot closer to the goal line and your habit, you want to get across that goal line. But it was very interesting because he was kind of frustrated. He goes, when Baker was here, he reminded me, get out of bounds, don't score. And Hey, you say what you want about Baker Mayfield, but that wasn't obviously said to him. I don't know if that needed to be, but it would have been a nice little reminder. So that was an interesting one. But there was a lot of very interesting results. But I go back to Buffalo as well. I watched the first half of that game until the Eagle game got going, and I didn't miss too much. Wow. And also Cincinnati, it's time to panic, I say. But with that, it's time to dive into the games ahead this week, week 3. We will start with those Las Vegas Raiders heading to Tennessee. The Raiders are going to be 1.5-point favorites at Tennessee. The over-under here is 45.5. Obviously, Tennessee, they're struggling big time offensively and defensively. A lot of questions out there in Nashville. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Raiders heading to Nashville to take on the Titans.
Okay, 2 areas where the Raiders absolutely were their own worst enemy over the last several seasons. One, the defensive secondary, which I always just call the Swiss cheese approach to defense because there's too many holes in it. The other is they don't have that killer instinct where they can put away an opponent when they've got a lead. That happened time and time again over the last few seasons. To be up by 20 points the way they were executing well. Jacobs was actually performing very well in the first half. And then what happens? The wheels come off the wagon. Devontae Adams barely got any looks last week. Hunter Renfrow was trying to make things happen, which he didn't need to make happen, which is how he fumbled the ball at the end of the game. And it was just not good. What do they have to do going in against Tennessee? Well, Tennessee was the number 1 seed last year, and now they're 0-2. They've got 107 yards in 2 games. Henry does, I think it was Henry, and he only had 25 against Buffalo. And we talked about that last week. Is he fatigued? Has he just taken too many runs, too many touches? Is his body just tired? He's not playing like he used to play. And the Raiders defense, as bad as they are against the pass, they're pretty good against the rush. So if that's the output they're going to get from Derrick Henry, then they have a very good chance to hold them intact. If they can get some pressure on the quarterback, then they're going to have a better game. Raiders, if they protect the ball, if they execute, if they play a diverse offensive attack, run, over the middle, use the screen passes like you did in the first half last week, incorporate Jacobs, money line on the Raiders, and it's going to go over 45.
Yeah, I like the over. I think we are going to see some points. When you see a spread, at least myself personally, when you see a spread, anything less than 2, I just kind of look at that as a pick 'em, go check the money line at that point. I was very, I guess, bummed. I mean, not nearly as bummed as Raider Jim, but to see the Raiders just kind of
collapse.
Yeah, they did. They collapsed. And that was a game. Look, week 1, they played their tails off. They weren't good enough. They weren't able to beat the Chargers. That's facts. No big deal. You move on. Week 2, though, this might be a game. I think we all look at the AFC West, at least top to bottom, as the best division in football. At least I do. Game like that, a loss right there, that could be the difference between a wild card. That could be maybe a difference between a division, or maybe be the difference in making the playoffs at all. And it's really, really unfortunate to see that, especially late. With Tennessee, obviously, they have a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I think one thing that's really kind of working somewhat against them, with all due respect to Mike Vrabel, I think he's a fantastic coach. He's not the guy to get the offense going. It's going to have to be somebody else. Mike Vrabel isn't an offensive guy. He'll get the defense under control, but outside of that, he's not going to, whip up a game plan in 5 days. And I don't think there's anybody on that coaching staff that can, because I think they have, like you said, become so reliant on HB power, halfback power, straight ahead. He's going to get 4 yards of carry and we'll be just fine. And conversely, now Ryan Tannehill has to throw the ball more. Well, go back to what happened in Miami. When Ryan Tannehill has to be the focal point of that offense, they are not good. With all that being said, I just think Tennessee is too good to go 0-3. I'm going to take Tennessee here just because I'm not actually going to bet this one, but for the sake of the podcast, I'm just going to take Tennessee just because, like I said, I don't look at this team as an 0-3 team. I could be very wrong. I could still be maybe looking at them in a better light than they actually should be. But I think for right now, the Raiders giving points on the road after what I saw last week, I'm not on board for that. But once again, Tennessee is not a team that I just, oh, this is done. No big deal. 2 years ago, big difference. And I just think for the Raiders, a nice, progress over the last 2 years. You would have told me 2 years ago the Raiders are going into Tennessee as the favorite. I would have asked you what happened to Henry, what happened to Tannehill, and what happened to everybody else.
Right.
So at least they're showing, the bettors are at least feeling the Raiders, or maybe not feeling the Titans, but we shall see. I really do like the over, though. I think we are going to see some points being scored. Two teams that I hate to use must win week 3, but I mean, definitely for Tennessee, and then for the Raiders, just to get that taste out of their mouths from last week. So moving on to another game we have going on in the AFC West is the Kansas City Chiefs -5.5 at Indy. The over under here is 50.5. Raider Jim, what you got? Chiefs at Colts.
Well, the Chiefs, as we said in the beginning, like the Bills, these guys are the real deal. They're living up to the hype and all the press. So the real story in this game is Indianapolis. Indianapolis, 0-1-1. That's amazing. They do have Matt Ryan under the center, but Matt Ryan has become a target. He's been sacked 7 times in 2 games. He's an elder statesman. He's got to be protected better than that. And if you think Chris Jones is on the defensive side for Kansas City and doesn't have a knife and fork out getting ready for a nice long afternoon and a big snack, he could make it a real long afternoon for Matt Ryan. Now, with that said, Ryan also didn't have Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce last week, who are both supposed to be back. And that might help Ryan if his offensive line can give him just a little bit of protection. At least he's got a couple more targets, and maybe he can get some releases and at least keep his jersey a little cleaner than last week. But with that said, Kansas City is just a machine. It doesn't matter that they don't have Tyreek Hill, and everybody thought that was going to be it. When they broke up the Watkins Hill team from a couple years back, everybody thought that was going to be detrimental. It just doesn't matter. They have these interchangeable players, and they're just racking up yards, racking up points. I see Kansas City covers the 5.5 spread on this one, and I think it's going to go under 51 only because I don't think Indy's going to score.
I agree on both of those. I think this spread is, 5.5 points for a team that just lost to Jacksonville and another team that barely, was able to get a tie against Houston, and you're going to say that they're only 5.5 points worse than Kansas City. I'll take Kansas City probably north of 7 here. Honestly, I think Kansas City's going to win this game probably by double digits. The scary thing, I think, for teams in the AFC, as if it wasn't hard enough to be like, we're going to have to deal with Buffalo at some point. You're also going to have to deal with Kansas City. And the thing that I've really seen over the last few years with Kansas City is their evolution of, 2-3 years ago, they were the running gun. They're going to throw the ball all over the field and, Tyreek Hill, Kelsey, and all those guys. Now they're able to look at what we saw last Thursday when they were down, and they take a deep breath and go, we'll be just fine. We can keep Edwards-Helaire in the offense. We don't have to just throw the ball 60 times a game. And I think that's really been a big benefit for the Chiefs. Something that, I look at Buffalo. They're kind of like the Chiefs were 3 years ago. That really fun team, really exciting to watch. But in the back of your mind, you're wondering, well, they haven't been there yet. They haven't been to that big game and what it's going to take. Kansas City has, and I think they've learned from that. I think Kansas City -5.5. I'm going to knock on wood because I haven't been very good this year, but this may be one of the easier picks we'll have all season. The over 50.5, I agree with you. Kansas City isn't the problem here. Unless Kansas City puts up 40 points, I see it going under, and I don't think Kansas City's going to put up 40 points. Right. They probably could, but I don't think they need to. And week 3 against a non-divisional opponent, you're not going to see the playbook opened up for Kansas City. They're going to do enough to win. Like I said, probably 7 to 10 points is what I expect. I see this being a 28-10, 28-14 if some garbage time sneaks their way in. You also hit the nail on the head. Matt Ryan, wow. He's not getting a whole lot of protection. But when he is, he just he doesn't seem right. He's obviously towards the end of his career. But Pittman coming back, I think that's huge. For at least for him. Now, unfortunately, the offensive line still has to, keep him somewhat clean, like you said, on that artificial turf. So, moving on to the another AFC West matchup, we have the leaders of the AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're heading to LA. They will take on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are 7-point favorites here. The over-under sits at 47.5. It's the AFC West. So, Raider Jim, the floor is yours.
I will tell you the biggest factor in this one for me, and I'm surprised the Chargers are an entire touchdown favorite. I get it, they're at home. I get it, they've been playing well. But guess what? Herbert's hurt. I don't care what anybody says, and they're never going to give you full disclosure on these things. And it's, I believe it's fractured rib or rib cartilage.
Fractured
and
rib
I don't,
cartilage.
it doesn't even matter what side it is. Let me tell you, I've had it. It hurts. I mean, it hurts to breathe. It hurts to sneeze. It hurts to laugh. And I get, and then it makes you think of how many years ago was it? It was like week 1. I think it might have been when Herbert got his first start, and the starting quarterback had a rib issue, so they went to give him a cortisone shot, and they punctured his lung. I mean, oh my God, it couldn't happen again, could it? I mean, I guess not. Now, here's what's going to be the difference in this one, and why I'm surprised about the spread. Herbert's hurt. He may not be able to put it out there like he has. He's going to have to be a little faster on the release. Not that he isn't, and he's got the targets. He's got the running backs. Jacksonville's got a pretty darn good defense, though. In 2 games, they've got 6 sacks. They've got 5 interceptions. And boy, Josh Allen against Rashawn Slater on the offensive line is going to be a fantastic thing. But if Allen, even if he doesn't get to Herbert, if he puts enough pressure where they've got to double team him, or he does get past Slater, or, with some spin moves or whatever, watch out, because all they have to do is get to Herbert a couple times in the first half, and they're going to have to rethink their game plan. So on this one, I'm going to take Jacksonville +7, but I think we're going to see over 47 points.
Yeah, I agree. I was a little, I guess, confused with the over-under. I mean, I know Jacksonville isn't lighting the world on fire, but their offense can put some points on the board, and obviously the Chargers can as well. Herbert, as you said, not only looked hurt, definitely is hurt, and there are a lot of people saying, oh, he's fine, look at the throws he made after he got hit. Well, let me introduce you to something called adrenaline. You can get hurt out there on the field, and the adrenaline will mask it. Well, guess what? Adrenaline does not last 10 days. So we'll see how that goes. As you said, Jacksonville, that defense is the strength of their team, and I think that's the key, because Trevor Lawrence, once again, I'm not going to make any judgments on him. It's still very early in his career, but he doesn't look like that guy that's going to be like, okay, well, if my defense is going to give up 35 points, we'll score 38. I don't think they're there yet. Right. So, yeah, even with Doug Peterson there at the helm, and that's another guy I want to bring up, because for years, the Jaguars have brought in, middling coordinators here and there, and obviously last year with the Urban Meyer debacle, but they go out and they get someone that obviously, he was let go from the Eagles, but that wasn't due to anything other than it was just time to kind of change the direction. It's a guy who won a Super Bowl. He's very, very smart. I think he's a very good coach. I think he's going to take the Jaguars to new heights. Now, when I say new heights, that's like 7-10, but that is new heights for Jacksonville, right, and they'll take that. And at this point, the AFC South is, I don't want to say theirs for the taking, but it's wide open. For this game, though, in terms of the spread, I see it a little bit closer. I'd like to buy that 7.5 or buy that half point to get to 7.5. This is going to be one of like 3 games the Chargers play that are like actually home games, where you'll have majority of Charger fans. I mean, with all due respect to the Jaguar fans, they don't travel terribly well. So that's something I guess the Chargers can look forward to. So they won't probably have to use the silent count. So good for them. But I do think the Herbert injury is enough for me to stay away from a full touchdown, giving up there especially in a game when I say, oh, it will be a home field advantage for the Chargers. Not really, though, just more so than they normally have. So it's not like they're walking into Lambeau in the middle of December to take on that, craziness. So see how that goes. Chargers. We both like Jacksonville to cover that 7 or 7.5. Moving on to the final game in the AFC West. You have the San Francisco 49ers, 1.5-point favorites at the Denver Broncos. The over-under here sits at 44.5. Raider Jim, what you got?
Well, another surprising point spread for me, because to only have the 49ers a 1.5-point spread kind of makes me scratch my head. But again, the way I've picked the last couple of weeks, obviously the guys know more than I do. But the Niners defense is really, really good. And they got Garoppolo under center this week. Garoppolo, Deebo Samuel, Jeff Wilson, that is going to be a fast start over there in the Mile High City. And the thing is, against this stout defense of the 49ers, Judy and Patrick Surtain are not 100%. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Another thing I read just today was an article on Russell Wilson stating why he's not running as much. And he says he doesn't feel he needs to be the one that runs as much, in so many words, because he's got such good running backs in the backfield. Plus, he's got nice targets out in the flat and down the middle of the field. But he's not producing the rushing yards. He's not using his legs like he did in Seattle, which I think has some of the Denver fans questioning. He's not going to get well received if they don't start turning it around and start becoming a powerhouse in the AFC West, because that's what those Denver fans want. Javonte Adams is going to need to have a real strong game. But the key here, the factor here is going to be the other side of the ball, Talanoa Hufanga. This guy is what everybody thought Jonathan Abrams was going to be. This guy is a tackling machine. He's got tackles for loss. He's got 17 tackles in 2 games. And I think he's going to be the difference. He's going to play, he can play the run. He can play the pass. I see San Francisco taking this one, no problem. 1.5, sure. If you want to go money line just to play it safe, sure. On my over-under, what did I put down here? I didn't put an over-under. Over-under, 44.5 is the over-under right now. I won't be surprised if it's under 45, because I think San Francisco is going to shut down the Broncos.
I agree on the over-under. I think it's under. Denver 2 games so far this year, 32 points scored. You don't have to be a mathematician to know 16 a game. And that's exactly how it's been. Week 1, it wasn't enough to win. Week 2, it was. They did beat Houston last week 16-9. But I look at those 2 teams. I look at Seattle and look at Houston. And I ask myself, if those 2 defenses can keep Russell Wilson under 20 points, under 17 points, what is this Niner team going to do? And the other part of it too, this is someone they are very familiar with. I mean, probably the Niners, I would have to imagine Kyle Shanahan has gone up against Russell Wilson more than any other quarterback as a head coach. Don't quote me on that. Just because I'm looking at, LA, it's kind of a mix between Goff and Stafford. So they're very familiar with how Russell Wilson goes about his business. And another thing that was very interesting to me, I didn't see it until this week. I don't know where I saw it. I saw it somewhere on social media. But when the Broncos were playing the Seahawks week 1, that Monday night game in Seattle, Tyler Lockett, the wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, was making calls to the defense about what Russell Wilson and the wide receivers were going to run. He knew their play call. And what that tells me is Russell Wilson showed up and they went, hey, how'd you run the offense? And they went, okay, sounds good. And they haven't changed anything like that. Well, guess what? Now you're going up against the San Francisco 49ers, which outside of Seattle, is probably the second most team that's most familiar with how Russell Wilson runs an offense. So I'm in the same boat as we were with the Kansas City spread. I will take -1.5. I'll go up probably up 4 or 5 for these guys, because I do think San Francisco is going to get the job done. I mentioned it last week. San Francisco was kind of working towards a situation where they may lose the locker room if they didn't get Jimmy Garoppolo on the field, because there were a lot of players that thought he gave them the best chance to win. Now, obviously, the very, very unfortunate and gruesome injury, it wasn't even, I didn't watch like the actual, like when they show the replay, like, oh, I don't watch those. That's not my style. But when they showed him try and stand up, and you could just that was tough for me. And you knew immediately. Thoughts and prayers going to him. Hopefully he gets a, nice recovery. But in a, I guess, somewhat morbid, twisted sort of way, this might actually work out for the 49ers. I know that's kind of terrible to say, but we're bettors over here. And, we do what we can to make a little bit of money, and that's right there for us. So give me San Francisco. In terms of the over-under, it's kind of the same thing where we talked about with Indy against Kansas City. Is Denver going to be able to do their share to get us over get us over 44.5? I say no, especially that 49er defense and everything. I think we see an under here. And then, give me San Francisco -1.5. This would be a very, very safe pick in my mind. I think if you parlay Kansas City, San Francisco, you probably will be a little less than even money, but you'll be able to, enjoy Sunday without having to worry too much, because I think those are two spreads that are very, very manageable there. So moving on to the NFC South, we have the New Orleans Saints 3-point favorites at the Carolina Panthers. A 40.5 is the over under. I'll get this one started. Channel my inner coach right now. Obviously last week, maybe in terms of the other teams' debacles, in terms of kind of collapsing at the end, the Saints don't necessarily catch your eye or anything like that, but they gave that game away. They were in that game pretty much the entire time till the last 10 minutes of that game, and it all just kind of came crashing down. Obviously, Tampa Bay is a very good team. Tampa Bay is much better than Carolina. However, New Orleans going on the road, 3 points seems a bit much to me. I haven't been overly excited about what I've seen out of Baker Mayfield, but I think he's a step up from Sam Darnold, and that's all you can really hope for if you're a Carolina Panther fan. I'm not going to actually bet this one, but holding a gun to my head and for the sake of the podcast, let me buy a 0.5 point. Give me Carolina +3.5. Let me watch this field goal game. Over under here, I'm going to go over, just because I do think these offenses will get rolling. I mean, obviously, Jameis Winston had a really rough game last week, but I think we'll see some points being scored. And 40.5, that, I mean, 21-20 and we're home. So we're not talking about a shootout we needed here to get the job done. So give me the over and give me Carolina +3.5. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? New Orleans at Carolina.
What a game. The Baker project is going to be questioned if Carolina starts 0-3, and that could very likely be the case this weekend. Last week, really look at the scoreboard last week. 45 minutes into the game, we've got 15 minutes left. Buccaneers 3, Saints 3, and the Saints shut out in the second quarter and the third quarter. Winston did not have a good game, but let's not throw all kinds of guilt and blame on him. The guy was sacked 6 times, which means his line wasn't protecting him, which means he was hurrying, which means he was frazzled. He was 25 of 40, 62%, and he threw 3 interceptions. Wow. And he didn't have Alvin Kamara. You talk about, you might as well tied one hand behind his back and said, go play the game. Now, on the other side of the ball on the offense, McCaffrey, 128 all-purpose yards. The question is, does he finish week 3 and come out of it 100%? Because this is about the time. It's between here and game 5. It seems like he starts to get dinged up a little bit. The pressure is going to come from Carolina. Brian Burns, he's going to try to get to Winston, get him to hurry, make him move his feet. On the other side of the ball, Cam Jordan is going to face the rookie Ike Ekwonu, who this poor kid has just drawn the short straw the first 3 weeks out of the gate, but he's doing okay. In the end, I think the Saints are going to be too much for the Panthers. I'll take the 0.5 point in the other direction and go New Orleans -2.5. But I agree. I think it's going to go over 40 in this one. I just there's something about it. If Baker, the chemistry just doesn't seem to be there yet. And the best thing he's got going for him is McCaffrey is back. or seems to be coming back. But even at that, 128 all-purpose yards, great game, but it's not a great McCaffrey game compared to a couple seasons ago. So we'll see what happens.
It's not the taking over the game that we're kind of used to with CMC. And like you said, the chemistry in Carolina with Baker Mayfield definitely needs some work being done. It's going to be very, very interesting. I will say, I kind of brought it up to you. Yeah, 3-3 going into the fourth quarter, and you've already seen ejections. I mean, I felt like it was the early 2010 Steelers and Ravens going at it. I thought Ray Lewis and Ed Reed were going to fight James Harrison and Troy Polamalu at some point, and then realized, no, wait, this is Tampa Bay and New Orleans. Not used to that out of those two teams, at least the low scoring. There's always a little, at least with Mike Evans and Marshawn Lynch, doesn't matter where they are. They are not going to be inviting each other to each other's weddings or retirement parties when that comes about. So moving on to what I think will be the game of the week. It is going to be the Battle of the Bays, as Chris Berman used to say. Green Bay heads to Tampa Bay. The Buccaneers only 1-point favorites. The over-under here is 41.5. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors to start this one off. Buccaneers hosting Aaron Rodgers and the Packers.
Yeah, so last week, the Packers, Aaron Jones runs for 132 yards against the Bears. Unfortunately, the Bucs aren't the Bears. And while they haven't been overpowering against the ground, they're going to step up more than Chicago did. Jones, A.J. Dillon, they got to have strong games. For Tampa Bay, it's got to be that other side of the ball. Devin White and Levante Adams have their work cut out for them. In my mind, on my mind, this one is going to be the defense will win the game. Do I think it's going to go over 41.5? Probably not, because look what happened with indoors, dry field, Saints and Tampa Bay. And like we said, after 45 minutes, it was 3-3. So I don't see it being much different in this one. The big hype, of course, is this the last time we see Aaron Rodgers, one of the last times we'll see Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady on the field at the same time? Great sentimental storyline for all you NFL fans. I just don't see, this is a very tough one. I don't know if I even made a pick in my notes. Put a gun to my head, and I'm going to take Tampa Bay money line, though, because they're at home.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tampa Bay, I think, has just been more consistent this year. Obviously, it's only week 3, so very small sample size. But Tampa's 2-0, and they've gotten the job done weeks 1 and 2. Green Bay obviously got the job done last week, but I think we all expected them to do what they do against the Bears, death taxes, and Aaron Rodgers beating the Bears. Week 1 is still what I go back to, though, with the Packers. And I know they always kind of start slow, and week 1 is usually when you can get them. But, we'll talk about the Eagles here in a minute, but they lost to a Vikings team. They got dominated by a Vikings team that, wow, did not look good Monday night. And now these Packers, despite getting that nice win, now they got to go face Tom Brady, and that vaunted defense. Obviously, Tampa Bay here. For me as well. I like the money line. I don't, the 1 point, who knows at that point, you might as well just money line it. The over under here is, I'm so torn just because, you hear Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, and then 41.5 should not be the next thing you say when it comes to to the over under, because of what those two quarterbacks can do. But a lot of this is on that defense. And at the end of the day, the reason I'm giving my nod to Tampa Bay, they just have a better defense. And that's going to be good enough for me to feel good about. I'm just excited for this game. Obviously, if you want to bet it, feel free. But for me, it's like you said, probably the last time we're going to see Rodgers versus Brady. We never saw it a whole lot anyway. So anytime you get to see it, enjoy it. And two teams that probably 2 of the 3 best teams in the NFC going at it early, possible NFC championship or NFC divisional matchup preview early on. So moving on to the NFC East, and I'll try to quell my excitement for this one and try not to get too high on the Eagles, but my goodness, they are going to be 6.5-point favorites as they head to Washington to take on the Commanders. The over under here is 47.5. 6.5. It's kind of dangerous for a division game, even with how the Eagles just dominated the Minnesota Vikings. And that's where I want to start with what we saw Monday night out of the Eagles. And more importantly, out of Jalen Hurts. There are a lot of questions about what we're going to see out of Jalen Hurts. It's kind of his make it or break it year. There's no more excuses. You have weapons everywhere. You have a fantastic offensive line. You have a good young coach. You have a fantastic defense. No more excuses. Well, guess what? He isn't making any. He had a fantastic game, much to the chagrin of my fantasy team. I had a 21-point lead heading into Monday, and I think by the end of the first quarter, it was done. But I'm okay because the Eagles dominated. And with that being said, the Eagles tried to let the Vikings, I don't know if they let or tried to let them, but the Eagles gave the Vikings chances to get back in it. There was a blocked field goal that got returned almost to the house, put them in good field position. And then there was kind of a fluke screen interception that set the Vikings up immediately into red zone. Kirk Cousins would throw one of his 2 interceptions to Darius Slay in that game. So for the Eagles, everything's looking great. However, it's still going to be a divisional game. You cannot sleep on the Commanders. And I will say this, there's not going to be a single person that wants to beat the Eagles more than Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, whether he admits it or not, wants to put up a career game. And you can't really blame him. This is a team that essentially said thank you, but no thank you. And, I hate to say it, but it's worked out for the Eagles. I've always been a Carson Wentz fan. I hope in 2 months, when the Commanders do come to Philly, he gets a nice hand. He won't, but I think he should. The Eagles fans need to be very, very grateful for what Carson Wentz did. I continue to say we don't win a Super Bowl without Carson Wentz's regular season. In terms of this game, you know what? I'm gonna take Washington plus 6.5. I see the Eagles winning this game, but I don't see them blowing out Washington. I just think Ron Rivera and that team's going to be ready for them to at least compete. In terms of the over-under, 47.5, I'm going to take the under here just because the Eagles defense has been great. And as good as the Eagles offense has been as well, they're still leaving a lot of points on the board. They could have easily won that game 38-7, something like that. There were a lot of kind of mental mistakes here and there. So I will take that under that 47.5. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Philly 6.5-point favorites as they head to Washington.
Yeah, I will tell you, I've just got a few notes written on this one, and it started out with pretty much everything you're saying. Jalen Hurts off to a great start. I mean, you got to tip your hat to him. He's playing with confidence. He has one hell of an offensive line in front of him, too, and that doesn't hurt. And on the other side of the ball, is that Sammy Baugh? Nope, it's Carson Wentz, but it sure looks like Sammy Baugh at times. Wentz, I think, is number 2 in passing right now.
Yeah.
And wow, that good for both of these guys. It's nice to see them out there in their respective uniforms and playing the way they are. Here's the difference to me, even though it's Washington at home. Washington doesn't have Cam Curl in the secondary. If they had him, they may be able to do something to counter the passing game of the Eagles, not to mention the running game that's going just under 190 yards per game. That is a diverse offense when you can rack it up the way they are. The Washington secondary, they make the Raiders secondary look pretty decent. So I really think the Eagles are just going to come out. They're going to dominate this one. I think they'll give up some points. I think it's going to go over 47, but I see Philadelphia. I'll grab a half point, but I think Philadelphia covering by 6 is no issue. I was quickly trying to find out what the weather is going to be because I know we've got storms coming up on the East Coast. But for the life of me, I am NFL home, 1 cent, but I am not seeing anything for the weather right now.
I'll just kind of add into that as well with Jalen Hurts. Obviously, he's not 6'5". He's not. He's 6'1", 6'2". He's on the shorter side, but he's a tank. We saw some runs where maybe other quarterbacks would have just gone down or slid. He's fighting for yards, and not only fighting for yards, he's getting yards. They showed, I think it was in high school. He's a high school senior squatting 500, and then his final year Oklahoma squatting 600. I mean, excuse me, for a for anyone on a football field to be doing that anywhere, really. That's something you got to take notice of. And one other thing for the home field for Washington over the last 3 or 4 years, mainly because of the actions of that owner out there in Washington, the Eagles take over whatever I wanted to say RFK Stadium. I know it's not RFK Stadium. Whatever, is it FedEx? I don't even know if it's FedEx still. But anyways, whatever that stadium is, the Eagles take it over, and I don't expect this week to be any different. So I think that home field is kind of but even then, it's going to be a tough one. And I think for me, I'm just kind of tempering my expectations. I'll probably be a little down on the Eagles over the next few weeks because as nice as the schedule looks, I know they're going to drop one against a team that they shouldn't. It's going to happen. It's human nature. And everything just kind of lines up here with a divisional game and the Carson Wentz situation as well. But moving on to the other NFC East matchup we have going on, the Dallas Cowboys taking on, yes, you guessed it, Raider Jim brought it up earlier, the undefeated New York Giants. They have a massive 1-point favorite they're a 1-point favorite in this one at home. And we have the lowest over-under of the year, I believe, with a over-under of 39. I'll get this one started. I think for Dallas last week, they had a game plan and they executed it, and good for them. But a lot of it was relying on the defense and relying on a less than offensive line for Cincinnati. We'll get into them momentarily. But for Cincinnati, they struggled. Joe Burrow probably saw the world from his back more than he wanted to last week. I don't see that happening again for Dallas. I think the Giants are a team that, similar to Jacksonville, when I said Jacksonville is being taken to new heights, well, the Giants might be taking to new heights, and 8-9, 7-10. I think any Giants fan will take that. The big question, though, is Daniel Jones, because I do feel like the Giants are 2-0 in spite of Daniel Jones rather than because of. That's just maybe a little bias on my part. I just it goes against everything, even with the Cooper Rush and all that stuff. I still think Dallas is the more talented team. I do think they win this game, but it's going to be an interesting one. I'll take Dallas. Give me the money line. In terms of the over-under, goodness gracious, I could see it going both ways. I know it sounds crazy on a 39. I could see this being a 16-10 game. So you know what? I'm going to take the under. I just haven't seen enough out of collectively these two offenses to really look at and go, you know what? They're going to do what they need to do. And even not hitting 40 points seems a little crazy, but I don't know. I can't see it happening. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Dallas heading to the undefeated Giants as 1-point underdogs.
I think the big focal point I see in this one, and you were hitting on it towards the end of your piece, Daniel Jones. The stat that's out there is 49% of his dropbacks, he's been rushed. He's been pressured. And not good. Not good if you're Daniel Jones without pressure. But when you put that much on him, it doesn't help his game at all. He's got Evan Neal, who is only playing his third game as offensive tackle. So it's the other quarterback that they're going to need to worry about. And I don't mean Cooper Rush. I mean, when I say the other quarterback, I mean Micah Parsons. That guy is going to be sitting there in the defensive huddle. He's going to call the initial lineup. He's going to get them out there. He's going to survey. He's going to be able to say exactly what they're doing. He's going to start barking out, and I think he's going to expose the Giants. I don't know that it'll be necessarily a walk, but I think you're right. I think Dallas just has a little more maturity and a little more game on them. You know, they had to go through the situation last year where they brought in Cooper Rush, and they fared okay, but he's been in the situation before. So I see this being low scoring. I like Dallas on the money line, but I think it's under 40 for sure.
Yeah, it's I think there's been a bit of a vote of confidence. It hasn't been like audible or anything like that, but excuse me, the Cowboys could probably go out and get 2 or 3 quarterbacks that we would believe are better than Cooper Rush, but they haven't done that. And now maybe they don't want to give up picks or whatever that may be. So I do think maybe they see something in Cooper Rush that says, you know what, we might not win the division, and it's not a whole season for Dak, but he's going to have to deal with it when he comes back. But they might look at it and go, you know what, we could finish second in this division with Cooper Rush and keep all of our picks. So I think that's something that's interesting, because I saw an article about kind of the quarterbacks that are quote unquote available. I think some of them could probably look a little bit better in a Dallas jersey than Cooper Rush, but I think Dallas says, you know what, we're okay where we're at. And that's something. And they beat the defending AFC champs last week, for better or worse. You know, obviously we might not be seeing what we've seen out of Cincinnati the past few years, but they did get that win. So moving on to our second.
If I may, one more remark on that Dallas game from last week. And it doesn't have anything to do with the Giants, doesn't have anything to do with the Cowboys. There comes a time and a place when you could put on fancy, blingy hardware and fur hats and smoke cigars and fur coats in a locker room, but you better damn make sure you can execute and keep your team on top. So starting at 0-2, the Bengals really better put themselves in check with their post-game, pre-game, locker room antics. Get a victory, and then you can go back to playing around, okay?
Yeah, and then the quote of all quotes, I think it was Lyle Collins in the offseason, said, Joe Burrow's new bodyguard is here. Well, he's on pace to be sacked 110 times, so I don't think that's going to be a bodyguard in his next career path. But anyways, moving on to another very interesting game in the AFC. You have the Baltimore Ravens, who are going to be 2.5-point favorites as they head to Foxborough to face the Patriots. The over-under here is 43.5. Raider Jim, I'll give you the honors to start this one off. Ravens favored in Foxborough.
As I touched on in the beginning, perhaps the only debacle that outdid the Raiders last week was Baltimore, giving it up the way they did. And wow, if they can just play the full 4 quarters this week, they should be better, because New England is not the New England of the past. We said it going into the season. We've said it the first 2 weeks of the season. Lamar Jackson should be able to put up a good game against against the Patriots. Patriots just don't have Pro Bowl talent on their team. They just don't anymore. It's all gone, and they're in that rebuilding time. They have Belichick. That's like the biggest name they've got right now. But unfortunately, he doesn't put on the pads and go out there. So look for Baltimore. I'm not saying they're going to have an easy game, but I'm looking at a line right now. Somebody says Mac Jones might look worse than he did last year. Well, that's a terrible remark, to have written about you, but sometimes the truth hurts. I think Baltimore covers at the -2.5. The over-under 43.5, I did find my weather reports, and nobody's got bad weather. It's cloudy, things like that, but there's no precipitation anywhere. I just don't see New England scoring. It's another one of those games. 43.5 is not a big line. It's kind of middle of the road line. 3-4 years ago, 43.5, we would have laughed at it with Baltimore and New England. It's not those teams anymore. So, Lamar Jackson's a little bit slower, not a lot slower, still a hell of a lot faster than me. And he doesn't need to be. He will not need to be this time. So look for Baltimore to cover at -2.5. Look for New England, and look for the over/under to be under 44.
I agree on both of those. I actually look at this game and it screams Baltimore 21-17 or Baltimore 24-17, which either way, they're going to get you the cover. They're going to get you the over, or the under. So I do like Baltimore in this one for a lot of the reasons you stated, and a lot of it's because of New England. Now, obviously, they did go and beat Pittsburgh, but I don't think any of us expect Pittsburgh to be better than Baltimore. I think we all expect Baltimore, especially with the way Cincinnati's starting, to win that division, or at least be at the top of that division. Lamar Jackson, he wasn't the reason they gave that game up. Now, obviously, maybe there were some play calls and maybe he could have made this play or that play. But at the end of the day, I think John Harbaugh, is going to, it's probably been a week for him to be like, okay, I don't know what happened last week, but we're not going to let that happen again. He's a very veteran, and he's been through the ringer numerous times. I'm sure last week must have left arguably the worst taste in his mouth, maybe since he's been a NFL head coach. So I do think we see a big kind of turnaround from Baltimore. And for New England, like you said, they're just, it's Belichick and friends, essentially. I mean, you're not getting the same guys coming back, and you do still have, at least that defensive mind. But like you said, he ain't putting on those pads. And, the guys from Mike Vrabels and the Teddy Bruschi's and the Rodney Harrisons, they're not walking through that door. So I'm going to take Baltimore. Like I said, give me the under as well. I do see it around that 21-17, 24-17 game. That'll keep us under the 43.5. So finally, our final game of the weekend is actually, I believe, the only game with two 2-0 teams going up against each other. It is the Buffalo Bills 6-point favorites as they head to Miami. The over-under here is 52.5. I'll get this one started. I think this is, I don't want to say slam dunk, but Buffalo looks like a team that is going to probably go 14-3, 15-2, and maybe those two games were kind of flukes. I just think Buffalo is head and shoulders ahead of everyone, and that includes my Eagles, includes the Chiefs, things like that. Now, Miami has looked good. I think the Tyreek Hill experience, or experiment, and it's an experience too, but the experiment has worked. I think Tua is looking better. I know he's like number 3 in the MVP odds right now. I would just tell everyone to pump your brakes there. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 MVP candidate. However, this team, I think, is able to go out and finish second in this division, but they're not getting close to Buffalo. It is in Miami. So maybe the home field comes into play. I guess I'll buy a half point, maybe just to feel a little bit better. That 5.5 maybe looks a little bit better than 6, but I have no qualms about Buffalo -6 against Miami, a team that, I'm happy for, but I'm not sold on. In terms of the over under, I think it's going over. I think we're going to see a shootout. It's hard to watch these two teams and you go, yeah, I'll take the under, unless it's under, 48 or 60 or something like that, some college spread or something like that. So it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. But I think Buffalo probably wins this by a touchdown at least. And we see some points being scored on both sides of the ball. I will say, though, that Buffalo defense has been really good. They're going to get a test this weekend against Miami, a team that might not be the best, but they are probably the fastest. And that's a nice little challenge for them, because it will be, I assume it will be hot in Miami. Definitely hotter than it would be in Buffalo. I can guarantee you that. So, Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Buffalo heading to Miami to take on the Fish as 6-point favorites.
Call on the weather, 87 degrees at game time. Bills versus Miami. Bills -6, no problem. Here's talk about last week's game. Miami had this great game. Tagovailoa had a fantastic game at the end. Threw a couple interceptions in the first half, but man, he racked up some yards and some points, didn't he? Now, with that said, second half. First half, Baltimore was owning them. Baltimore was owning them most of the game. Buffalo's not Baltimore. And as you alluded to, Buffalo defense is robust. These guys are good. Von Miller makes you think. All you got to do is look across the line. You see Von Miller. Wait a minute. He was just straight behind the nose guard. Where'd he go? Now he's over there. Now he's over there. He's drinking from the fountain of youth. I don't know how he's doing it, but he's doing it very well. Here's what you're not going to see this week in the second half if Buffalo runs it up the first half and gets a nice, comfortable lead. You are not going to see a bunch of blown coverages that allow Tua to sit back there. And not only that, not just Tua, you can't have blown coverage against Tyreek Hill and company and guys like that. They're just going to go nuts. So they go back to the huddle. Hey, we think we can make this move on this route. We're going to be able to get open. Boom. And they did it. And that's what was going on. Not going to happen against Buffalo. So it's not going to be the same fairy tale ending for Miami. And I will tell you, I like the Dolphins. I like what they're putting together. I'm a fan of the quarterback, fan of Tyreek Hill. So this is nothing against them. I just think Buffalo is that good. So Buffalo takes this one -6, no problem. Over 52.5. I'm with you. This one goes over. It's going to be a good one, but it's probably going to be 35-28, something like that.
Yeah. I'll be honest right now, and maybe I'm just drinking too much of the Bills Kool-Aid, but I don't know if there's a team in the NFL that I would pick +6 over Buffalo right now. And once again, I know it's small sample size, but they just are already in midseason form when so many teams are, as you alluded to at the top of the show. Some of these players, this is essentially preseason for them because they haven't played at all. And I do think there are going to be some questions going forward for coaches. Okay, we do need to be worried about injuries in preseason, but we also do need to be worried about readiness. And it's going to be difficult, I think, for this one for Miami, but I think Buffalo gets the job done. It'd be very interesting to see how they look this week. But Raider Jim, that's all we got. How about some final thoughts as we get ready for week 3?
As you said, and going into this, I think it's starting to gel a little bit, and what it's going to look like going from here on out. Buffalo, Kansas City, obviously the front runners in this one. The Rams are playing like the Rams, even though they had a setback at the start. It's just going to be competitive, and I still say the AFC West, even with the Raiders in that division, I think the AFC West is still probably the most competitive, or if not at least one of the 2 most competitive divisions in the NFL.
Well, hey, don't sleep on that AFC South. Things are getting spicy down there, but no, I'm just kidding. For me, we're about, let's say, 6 weeks away from the first Tuesday in November when we all take our American rights and, the right to vote. And it's not a presidential election or anything like that. They're obviously, wherever you are, more than likely they're voting on whatever governor propositions, blah, blah, blah. The only thing I ask of you, if you are going to vote, obviously you should. There are plenty of people in this world that have lost their lives and are willing to lose their lives just for the opportunity to vote. So if you can vote, do it. However, I do put a caveat on it. Vote after you've been informed. Do not read the mailers. You can, but do not use that to be your reason why.
I personally, educated vote.
Exactly. Please. That's what I've said all the time. Uneducated voters are the downfall of a democracy. And I just implore you, I don't care who you vote for. I don't care why you vote for it. I don't even care if you vote, but if you do vote on something, take the time to read both sides. Take the time to listen to both sides and then make your decision. And you know what? If you don't have time to educate yourself on everything, pick and choose. That's what I do. There's all kinds of propositions, all kinds of this and that. Pick and choose. Just make sure you sit down and you put the effort in, because as I said, we live in a country, maybe not be what we used to be or this or that, but we still live in a country that allows us once a year to vote for our leaders and vote for certain laws, things like that. I don't think you should flush that down the toilet, but if you do, or if you don't do that, just make sure, please, you educate yourself on the issues. And that's all you need, because you only have one vote on everything. You don't need to explain it to anybody else, anything like that. Just make sure you do your homework, please. But with that, thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the NFL Weekly here on the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. Thanks again for listening. It's time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon.
Peace out and go Raider Nation.